afternoon, everybody. I'm Donna Bergstrom. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota. I want to thank the media for coming out today, and I want to thank all of you for coming out here today. I know we're a little bit cozy in here, which I think is probably a good problem to have, so thank you so much for coming out. I also want to thank my mother and father for giving me life and for giving life to my 6 siblings. I want to thank also my son's birth mother for giving his life and choosing an adoption plan. Bonjour Anishinaabe, Donna Bergstrom, Indishnakas. Miss Kwagabiwi Zagayaganigandujwa, Lagazian Dudang, Wanigamisinginda. Chi Migwich Gichimanidu, Chi Migwich Ogichida, Chi Migwich Ogichida Akwe. I greeted you in Ojibwe, the language of my people, the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians, and also of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, the tribe whose traditional homelands include this beautiful area where we are standing, Duluth, or as we say, Onigamising. Life is sacred to the Ojibwe people. We believe that life is a gift from the Creator. It is not up to us to decide when someone lives or when someone dies. That is up to the Creator. And I firmly believe that I am a 21st century Indian here today because of the strong, brave, and wise elders who held that belief and never deviated from it. We know that children are our future and children are our strength. Now, once again, my people stand in the crosshairs of the dominant culture who are beating the drum to tell us that killing our babies is a reproductive right, that killing our babies liberates us to make choices as an individual, that terminating this gift is completely okay at whatever time you want, right up until the baby is born, no restrictions. That, by definition, is extreme. To not acknowledge it as such is to have had your conscience completely cauterized. The DFL tax-funded abortion on demand agenda is extreme. Both House File 1 and Senate File 1 show just how extreme and out of touch DFL has become. Socialist Jen McEwen, author of Senate File 1, the Duluth senator, spoke on Capitol Report saying, "Nothing will change with the passage of this bill." She speaks with a forked tongue. That's a lie. Gire buana, we say. Are you telling the truth? I want to make sure Minnesota and Duluth voters in particular realize how extreme socialist Jen McEwen is and how radical the DFL has become and how little regard that party has for our children, our families, and by extension, our lives. During last week's debate on the House floor for House File 1, the DFL proved they are only concerned about abortion being legal in all circumstances and at all points in time. And they certainly do not care about it being safe. When Republicans offered reasonable amendments to protect women and children, including requiring abortion facilities to be licensed and requiring late-term abortions to be performed in a hospital should they need to be performed, then even the DFL voted to repeal protections for infants that are born alive, for surviving botched abortions. Extreme. Senate DFLers and their socialists are taking up these horrifying bills, and they are doing so at breakneck speed. We have to act fast, rushing through divisive and extreme partisan priorities without bipartisan support. Let's take a pause to think this through. What this means 7 generations out, and that is an Ojibwe cultural tradition. We look to see what this is going to affect us 7 generations, how this is going to affect us 7 generations out. This isn't about codifying abortion rights anymore. This puts the health of women and children at risk. It's extreme and out of line. As the DFL labors to legitimize infanticide, what will our legislators do about existing Minnesota statutes that involve the unborn? Have they thought that through? So it appears the DFL's highest legislative priority today is eliminating parental rights and ensuring that 9-month-old pregnancies can be terminated at whim, irrespective of the fact that 8-month premature deliveries are routinely kept alive. The DFL's extreme pro-abortion legislation, extreme by any measure of scientific or rational consideration, reflects a level of moral and intellectual bankruptcy beyond anything many of us could have imagined even only a short time ago. This is typical of the extreme hyper-partisan agenda of the DFLers in St. Paul, and they are pushing and focusing on controversial and divisive political priorities, eroding parental rights, authorizing our children to be put in these unsafe situations, instead of working on critical issues that are facing us, like balancing our budget, giving the surplus back to the taxpayers, working on addressing failing literacy rates and growing achievement gaps in our schools. Those are the priorities we want to see them focus on. So we applaud our Republican lawmakers and any DFL members who are brave enough, wise enough, and strong enough to join with them to help us protect our mothers and children. We are so thankful for those in the legislature who are standing up to the DFL and the socialist extreme agenda. I'd like to invite Tim Miller from Plan Action up here to speak to us next. Tim, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Great job explaining things. So I too want to thank everyone. What a great showing of citizens of this region and also the media for coming here today. This is an important issue, folks, and we're really concerned that the public has no idea what's going on. And so it's incumbent upon all of us in this room to talk to our neighbors, to talk through our churches, to reach out to our legislators. So as Donna said, my name is Tim Miller, and I'm the Executive Director of Plan Action, which is a sister organization to Pro-Life Action Ministries of St. Paul. Many of you have heard about Pro-Life Action Ministries. They've been doing sidewalk counseling and prayer and other trainings on the front lines for 42 years. And we decided that there was a time to reach out to the rest of Minnesota, which is what has me here, to be able to speak the truth behind life, to defend it where we can, including in the public sector. And we're able to do that through Plan Action. I recently retired. I'm a 4-term member of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Proudly served. I'm the author of the 2 heartbeat bills that were presented in Minnesota, along with a lot of legislation in sexual assault and in sex trafficking to fight against those things, because, folks, this is all tied into the same. Donna talks about family, mothers, children, all of this. This is an attack on our society in and of itself, and all of us need to step up and fight about this. Now, because of my legislative background, I have a full understanding of what these bills are doing and the insidious nature of these. So, for example, a 13-year-old, I tell people some of these things and I don't think they believe me. A 13-year-old can be taken by their school counselor to go get an abortion and go back to school, and not only will the parents not know, if the parents find out under this legislation, there's nothing they can do to stop it. The other there's a Senate, I'll get to this in a moment, but the Senate is bringing up a vote on Senate File 1 on Friday, but there's a second piece of legislation that's going rapidly through at lightning speed. Folks, this stuff is going so fast. We've never seen this before. But in this other bill coming through, they look to, among other things, repeal the Born Alive Act. I was the proud co-author of the Born Alive Act in 2015, and it basically says, in the case of a botched abortion where the baby is still alive after the abortion, they must receive, under the Born Alive Act, they must receive full care from medical staff. And they're seeking to repeal that. And in a committee last week, in the Senate committee, I said, understand that even Planned Parenthood recognizes that when that child exits the mother's birth canal, even they agree that's a child. And yet, when that baby is laying there searching for its mother's warmth and protection, it's laying naked on a table to die. Reportedly, there are reports as long as 8 to 10 hours that baby. This is egregious. A lot of this stuff is very real, and it's very much happening. But I don't want to speak to you as a legislator. I want to talk to you about as a man of faith. Okay? I'm a strong Christian man, and I believe all life is sacred and comes from God. And
Amen.
I spoke out at that Capitol. I will never steer away from that. And what's happening is a darkness has befallen the state of Minnesota. But in God and in Christ we have ultimate victory, and we have life, and we have truth on our side.
Amen.
So that's why we need to speak to these people. I came up here today. I live in Princeburg, Minnesota, which is about 4 hours southwest of here. I drove up here because you have a senator up on the Iron Range, Senator Housechild, who is in a position that he can stop this on Friday. If he votes no, which will take courage, but is certainly, this is the Iron Range is a pro-life, the strongest pro-life in the state of Minnesota. People of faith, people of convictions. He represents them. He needs to answer to the people of his district. He needs to answer his conscience first, and then to the people of his district, and not be bullied around by Planned Parenthood and other special interest groups that are looking to profit off of this legislation. So what I call on people to do is first of all pray. We need God's intervention. Second, you can do something about this. Senator Jen McCune, she's very hard-hearted on this. I've testified before her. She's stuck in this. But we believe that Senator Housechild is a reasonable person, is a good man, and he is going to make the right decision on this. But he's going to need your prayer, your support, and your contact saying, please don't vote for this. Yes. Let me finish with this. Deputy Chair Bergstrom did a great job of explaining this, but I want to make a point on this. They are telling people like Senator Housechild that this is just putting into law what the Constitution already allows for. That is 100% lie. Yeah. There is nowhere in the Minnesota Constitution that gives a right to abortion, certainly abortion through live birth, which is what these bills do. They're doing some legalese, they're doing some tricks with some court cases that are still in court that we are still battling, to where some of these things, one judge in Ramsey County said that this is allowable in the state of Minnesota. So we're fighting there as well, okay? But if anyone tells you, well, this is a constitutional right, they are lying to you. And understand that by passing this law, this opens the door to so much more. In this bill, that same 13-year-old, without parents' knowledge or even input, can be sterilized. No. It's directly, we are not twisting things. It is literally in there that anyone can do this up until live birth. So we thank everyone for being here. I think we're more than happy to answer some questions, and we will certainly answer them to the best of our abilities.
Yes. Yeah.
Question right there.
Tim, when we talked earlier, I asked you if a contingent of people went down there, be down there Friday, and go to our senator up here, he's my senator, and go into his office. I used to do this when I was in township officers, and we do it in Soil and Water. So do you see that as a very viable thing for them to see faces there on Friday if this is voted on?
Yeah, so for those that didn't hear, it is likely the vote is going to the Senate on Friday. That's what we're being told. There's some procedural things right now. We'll know for sure by tomorrow if it's going to be on Friday. But every indicator is that it's Friday. If there's a vote on Friday, we don't know the time yet, but it's typically about 11 o'clock in the morning that the Senate goes into session. So certainly between now and Friday for sure is a time, if you can get down to St. Paul and talk to your legislators, absolutely do it. When the House voted on this last Thursday and it was passed, before House session we had over 150 people out there holding, we had these great signs. I don't have a picture, I wish I would at this moment. This great picture of a 16-week-old baby, and it says, I am human, 16 weeks old. So that is the message. One of the messages that is getting lost in all these legalese and stuff is those are human beings that we're trying to defend. Mm-hmm. I also want to say, before I forget, I'm remiss, we're here to not only defend the women whose babies these are, and we pray for them, but anyone who has had an abortion or been directly affected by an abortion, we do not condemn you. The creator of this universe does not condemn you. They love you and they want to heal you. There's a falsehood that's out there right now. These are people that were there last week and will be there this week to defend those mothers, those children in the state of Minnesota.
One other thing, if there are people that are interested in that, do you have any paper that we could write down names and contact to get a group to go down?
I do have some of the information out here of the two senators and then our House District Representative here. who is Liz Olson. Those of you on the western side of Duluth, and you need to follow her legislation because Liz Olson has modified the alternatives to abortion.
Positive alternatives.
Positive alternatives to abortion grants that many of our maternity home and supportive agencies for our mothers, it's modified now, so it basically takes all that out. And it just says to help pregnant individuals, or pregnant people, I forget what the exact name is.
Yes, I know the language well. It's called the Positive Alternative Grants, and who mostly saw those grants was Pregnancy Resource Centers, which was an alternative to abortion. We all know those and support them very well. There's a great one here in Duluth. Down by me, there's a couple good ones. And Liz Olson has authored a bill that rearranges all the language and not only, for all practical purposes, takes the money away from those people, but lines it up to give it to Planned Parenthood.
So we have her information on that sheet too. And I would like to call up at this time Therese Gruba. Therese, if you're ready. Therese is from New Hope for Families, and this is what I like to talk about, is the alternatives that we have to help support our families and our parents that are in this situation and make adoption plans if they need to, or find alternative options. So Therese, thank you so much.
I'm so thankful to have a chance to tell you a little bit about New Hope for Families. We're part of the coalition here in Duluth called, what is our coalition? Together for Life. Together for Life. And Tom Scher, right here. Tom, could you step inside the door? He's our house dad. We have a foster care shelter home.
Thank you so much.
May of 2019, we have taken care of over how many kids?
150 and then plus 7 now and another 3 maybe coming today.
We're very busy, but we are all about supporting families and introducing the Lord Jesus Christ into the picture and the sanctity of the unborn, the sanctity of life, and the sanctity of family. And so anyone is welcome to get involved with New Hope for Families. I have our business card here. If you're interested in the foster care system, there are things that I would like to see changed in the foster care system, the Department of Human Services. Our relationship with St. Louis County is really good at this point, but there are things that I think need to be changed in the legislation, in the voices, the people at the table, the biological family having a voice, the foster parents having a voice at the table, and the foster children having advocacy. And so those are things that we hold very dear, and the sanctity of the unborn. I do have one question for you.
Okay.
Is there anything in the Constitution of the state of Minnesota that protects the child? I know in Wisconsin, I just heard in Wisconsin, in their constitution, there's a legislation that actually protects the child. Do you know anything about that?
Well, in the concept, you're catching me off guard
I-
to say the actual reference, but I will tell you that the founding documents of the U.S. and the state of Minnesota certainly protects life coming from God. And one of the ironies is they keep saying that this is a fundamental right to abortion. They twist it a little bit, but they say fundamental right. And I continually say there is no fundamental right in any of our documents, our constitutions, and certainly before God. They're making this up. They have absolutely no place for it, but you have a fundamental right to life in the Minnesota Constitution.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you, Therese.
We've got a question. Obviously, this is very important to all of us here. And I appreciate Fox News, I believe it is, came here. Did you invite any of the other outlets, news outlets?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, so Marcy's here from PAC TV, or Just the Facts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, and the Republican Party of Minnesota did send out a media advisory to all of the media around the state. So not just here in Duluth. So everyone got the announcement for it.
Okay, and that's the other second part of the question is basically, well, we hear basically one side as far as I'm concerned. And that's unfortunate because not only do we hear the rhetoric from the DFL party and what have you, it gets even more enshrined by the media. So we got a real hard stand to make here. And I know organizations will go far if we had more support in that regard. And I just somehow, if we could get that news out to the news,
Yes.
That'd be great.
That's right. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point. We try very hard to have the media pick up our side of the story, if you will. So there's always letters to the editor with our local newspapers. Those are good ways to do it. So,
And if I could add, and I do thank Fox for coming, for their willingness to come here today, and certainly the media, and thank you to PAC TV. Thank you very much for the work that you do for what we would, I guess, the general population would call alternative media, and that's certainly something. I want people to, if you will, be encouraged that there is really an alliance of pro-life organizations. So Pro-Life Action Ministries, MCCL, Minnesota Family Council, the Minnesota Catholic Conference, Lutherans for Life, Life Legal, North Star Legal. There's groups I always forget whenever I get this list. We are working together with this, and this information is going out, all of our lists. We purchase some lists. We get the media out. We do social media. It is a challenge because what we call traditional media in Minnesota, by and large, has not been reporting on what really is going to be, for sure, is landmark is same-sex marriage. I believe that this is even higher, but it certainly can't be argued that this is a big deal. And it's firing through our legislature, and there's very little attention from the people that report on things in Minnesota. I think even the vote, this passed the House of Representatives last Thursday. And you need to understand, folks, that our laws, this is not hyperbole. This will be the strongest abortion law in the United States, and it's the only country that we can even come close to. I personally think we're passing up is North Korea. That's what we're talking about, and yet we're not hearing this in the state of Minnesota, that this is happening to our state.
you're painting it as DFL is for abortion and Republicans are against abortion. That is the furthest thing from the truth. What we're talking about is let's talk through all the ramifications of this bill and every aspect of it, which we're not getting. But
I believe this is very important, number one. But number two, I just want to let everybody know, we got to get involved. It's all about getting involved, talking to neighbors, family members. But just so people understand what's going also down there, is they want to control your kids and your grandkids. And this is going to come out in the school system. They're licensing teachers, and if they don't practice what they're told, they will not be a teacher. This is fact. This is what's coming up next. And they're going to screw with your kid's mind and grandkids' mind. And I'll tell you something, my opinion is the days of being nice are over with.
In my experience with anti-human trafficking, sexual abuse, and some of the laws, some of the bills that are coming down now, they are grooming children. One of the things to understand is that all this pro-abortion legislation that's going through Minnesota right now, there's a lot of things that are happening. There's the obvious unrestricted abortions through live birth. But we are very concerned, and we're challenging in the bills that are coming is I believe that they're going to compel all hospitals and clinics, employees of hospitals and clinics, pharmacies, schools. So we have an amendment on the floor on Friday that says you cannot perform abortions in a school parking lot. And people would say, well, why would you have an amendment like that? And I said, because under this law, there's a company called Just the Pill that has a mobile vehicle that can legally pull into a school parking lot and provide chemical abortions and perform surgical abortions in the school parking lot. And when we say, is there anything to stop this, the people that are authoring this bill and supporting it are saying, they're either saying nothing or they're emboldened enough to say, well, yes, because everyone has a fundamental right to have that abortion, including that student in the school parking lot. Another thing that we're going to fight against that they can't defend, this is very real, but I need to tell you the things that are very real. So the University of Pittsburgh a couple of years ago was found to be doing research on aborted children. Here's what they were doing, okay? So they were taking an aborted second or third trimester child, cutting their scalp off, transplanting it on the back of a rat, and it grows the baby's hair on the back of that rat, and they're doing research on that hair for human immune systems. Now, the University of Minnesota, to be clear, to our knowledge, is not doing that research, but the University of Minnesota procures, we know because they have to report this, they procure aborted babies every year to do research on optic nerves, on brains, on limbs. All of this is happening. And so we have an amendment in the Senate that says you can't do research on a baby's scalp on the back of a rat. Now, some may say that's like an alarmist amendment, but Senator Housechild, you can vote on our side with that. Misha, you can vote on our side with that one, right? Yes.
So I read the bill, and it seems really short.
SF1, very short.
So, everything in the bill doesn't have all this extreme language that we're talking about, and I think that's an argument that is gonna come against us and say, oh, you're just making up all these conjectures. What is your response to that? And then
Yeah, so my first response to whether or not we're making up these conjectures on a simple bill is that we bring this as a question, and they're either agreeing with us, so like a 13-year-old child question, on the House floor, the author agreed with us. They're not even hiding it anymore, or they have no defense against it. Because what this bill does, it is brief, it's vague, and Don asked me about that earlier. It's vague. What does that mean? It does two things. First of all, it opens up to a whole lot of, state of Minnesota having a whole lot of lawsuits, which I hope they're coming, okay? But what it also does, as a legislator, now I'm putting my legislative hat back on so that you understand this. In the state of Minnesota, I'm sure other places too, but in the state of Minnesota, it's not always our elected officials that are the problem. Our agencies have this tool called rulemaking. And rulemaking, for simplicity's sake, is you have this broad legislation, and then they fill in the gaps with agency rulemaking, okay? So they kind of legislate it again, and they take it in the direction that they want. And they have already said what they're going to do, because this is all about a woman's fundamental health right for services, no matter what age of the baby, all that sort of stuff. It's consistent with this stuff. So when we ask a question, can a 13-year-old have a school counselor take them to an abortion clinic and go back to school? First of all, folks, that's already occurring in Minnesota because of this little rule called judicial bypass, okay? Even though parents are supposed to be informed. But when we ask that, they specifically say yes, because every woman, every person, because I'm serious, men can have babies too. I don't believe that, camera, okay? But I'm saying that that's what they're saying. So every person, man or woman, has a right to their fundamental reproductive rights to do what they want with their body, regardless of age and regardless of the age of that baby. So yes, so that's why I want to be clear. I'm not saying University of Minnesota is going to be researching with the scalps of babies on their backs, but they have done, we know they've done research with baby parts. So when they say things like fetal cells, well, I looked, and an optic nerve and an eyeball is technically a cell. Group of cells, but it's an eyeball, okay? The people in Minnesota don't want this. It isn't Harris, but there's another major polling agency that's throwing these numbers out because the federal government is arguing a lot of stuff too. A nationwide poll said 75% of women think there should be at least some guardrails, should be at least some protections in an abortion. Minnesota has none of those.
Does anybody ever refer to it as murder? Because that's what it is.
Absolutely, all the time.
Killing, yeah. And in fact, when you do the research on when a death certificate is issued, that falls in line. So these doctors are required to fill out the death certificate because they have taken a life. So that's right.
I'm on the action group, and it says that they pulled it out of the Judiciary Committee and put it in the Rules Committee, and so it's going to be voted on today. Is that?
In the Rules Committee.
In the rules. So here's what's happening. This is procedural. This is for me as a legislator. Can keep this simple because Don also asked me this. So the Rules Committee in the House and in the Senate, they serve a couple purposes, but mostly they serve the purpose of putting bills that are ready to be placed on the floor to vote, on the floor.
Not really a question, I just wanted to kind of bring it down to reality. My wife and I are Gold Star parents. We lost our youngest son in 2007. He was murdered here in Duluth after he come home from Iraq. He was our youngest of 6. I don't see any difference of Adam laying up on the hillside. At that time he was, I can't think of the name, what they call it. But anyway, there a baby laying on a table allowed to die. He fought for our country, he'd come back, he was back for 1 week and probably suffering from PTSD. Well, I think so many times, how many little Adams is there? So that becomes pretty real when you hear that. You'll never get over it, you know that. But it seems to me that nobody, we all said we don't do anything. We should be out there calling and talking and marching and everything. I'm from Carlin County Republicans. We do a lot of marching and stuff that anybody knows about us. And we're very pro-life. And when you go through something like that, you know that that's given to you by God. And so many, cures for cancer are laying there on that table. How many little Adams, how many little Susies or whatever. So, it might be hard to listen to, and it was hard for us. So think about that when you go out from here today. By God, do something.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm sorry about that.
But coming out today really is taking action. So thank you all for coming out. Also, we have 2023 elections, which are basically our local elections coming up. School boards, city council, mayor of Duluth, and some of these other ones. In your area, take a look. Run for office. Just run for office, okay? We got a question right back here.
Is the Minnesota bill more radical than the New York State bill? It is? It is more radical.
When you encompass this bill plus the other ones that are the next one,
Yeah.
now we're really talking not big differences, but yes, because you can't have more radical. So understand when I say, we say no restrictions, because that's a word that they use, that's their word, and I say, well, really in Minnesota, we've had regulations. And just so you know, as a conservative Republican, I call Minnesota the land of 10,000 regulations, because it's just a very controlling state. So that you understand in contrast, to do a surgical abortion in Minnesota, you will no longer need a doctor involved at all, period. You only need, now they will say, well, it's a licensed professional. When you see the standard that a licensed professional is a tech and abortion clinic, just needs to be called licensed, and they can do this. With the second bill that's coming down the pike, so not this first one that's the vote on Friday, but the next one that's coming soon, so I want to be clear about this, okay? You can have someone a doctor lost their medical license in another state who can legally come here and start up operations as an abortion clinic. In that law, you can do that.
Can you see the verbiage of that?
Yeah, the second, so that one is that's House File 91, Senate File 70. The tricky thing is a lot of bills, folks, on any issue, if you want to see a bill, most of it is very common language, you can understand what it's doing. There are exceptions, and I want to be clear that Senate File 70, House File 91 is one of those. It has a lot of repealers, it has a lot of language changes, so it takes a little bit more to work through it to figure out what these things are. And when you have a repealer, what a repealer does is nothing more than you have this existing law, so like the Born Alive Act, and it just removes it. So the effect is that you no longer protect those children. That's the effect, right? In this first bill, although it's not stated because it says all individuals, that gets rid of parental notification, because parental notification would get in the way of all individuals.
Can we do that bill now on the?
Yes, the easiest, I will tell you that our legislature's websites are actually pretty functional, and they have a lot of information. So if you go to the Minnesota House of Representatives, same language on both sides. So. Well, House File 1 is what's currently, but
The one that's
70.
no, House File
91.
House File 91.
Yeah.
And then there's another House File now, 289.
Yeah, that's the positive for this.
Yes, and that's where the positive alternatives is being gutted and that money is being given. But that's an important bill to read, not only for that sake, but the rephrasing of what they're doing is what I think they're going to do to just flat out make it impossible to be a pregnancy resource center. That bill isn't out yet. We anticipate that coming. Just this morning, another bill came out, and I don't remember the House file because it was like, House File 400 and something. But it's taking away even more of these protections and rights. So There's abortion law, anti-abortion law. There's regulations, there's controls and stuff like that. But then there's law that is, whether it be about women or it be about medicine or things like that, that are sort of the different angles to all the same thing. Those are the bills that are also going through. I will tell you also on the House of Representatives website, when you do a bill search, their keyword search is really good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. One of the ways that as a person who's outside the legislature, even in the legislature, I would find bills by searching myself on keywords to find this obscure bill. Understand that there's the revisers is where the bills are written, and I'm told there's already over 3,000 bills written in the revisers this year.
When you go to the website too, I'll just point out that on that top tab bar, if you look to the right, sometimes they have like a legislative summary or council summary, or somebody summarized the bill, so you can read through that. It's a little bit easier to decipher.
And those are good.
Yeah.
They're written by nonpartisan staff, and they just say what the bill does.
Yep.
It's pretty good.
So,
So, yep, couple more questions?
Since the free media doesn't cover us, is it possible that we pay for commercials for billboards? Like, we
We
have
are.
to bypass, okay.
and I just heard one on the way here on 610. I think it was from MCCL, talking about this abortion bill, and I've seen some of our billboards out around.
Yeah, you're seeing the primary paid media that we're doing is primarily through Pro-Life Action Ministries, Plan Action, depending on, see, just so you understand, the reason why I have two organizations, Pro-Life Action Ministries can't say some of the things that I can say. So we just have two organizations, but we coordinate with these things. So there is advertising you'll see from us and from MCCL. Those are probably two of the more primary. But the Minnesota Catholic Conference and Minnesota Family Council is doing things as well. And then there's also local groups that are doing things. But yes, there's a great deal of paid, whether it be radio ads or billboards, but paid social media, some of those things that we're doing.
So we did invite, oh, Marcy, go ahead.
Tom Schreier from Pro-Life Action Ministries, who's on the street, I don't know if he's still out there or not, but he's on the streets on
He's here right now.
Thursdays and Fridays. Yeah,
He was in
yeah, he stuck his head in there
Oh,
for a
shoot.
moment.
Yeah,
I
he
would have
was,
him come in.
He might still be out there.
okay.
Well,
He's a little
anyway,
bit limited, quite frankly, he's limited on what he can say in this conference.
can he just say that he's on the streets twice a week down at,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay, so-
I'm just-
so
he may,
that-
and I'm sure that, so Brian Gibson is the executive director of that side.
Yep.
He may have talked to Brian and said, what should I say? There's quite a good chance that he just said, let Tim do the,
no, he's the one that stepped in when,
okay.
She-
But I'm saying,
yeah,
he may
we
be,
talked-
Pro-Life Action Ministries needs to be careful what they say in settings like this.
right.
Because I asked Brian if he wanted to come, he goes, why don't you just take care of all, because simply put, I can cross lines that they can't.
And then one other thing, this isn't just on PAC TV, which is cable channel in Duluth only. I have a Rumble account. I know that they're gonna flag this on YouTube, because I've been flagged before.
Yeah.
So it'll be under my name, Marcia Stromgren, YouTube channel, pro-life.
So that's Rumble or YouTube?
It'll be flagged on YouTube,
Okay, because it's.
so it's gonna have to go on Rumble.
Okay, gotcha.
Letters to the editor, I'll tell you what, are so effective because that's from the heart.
Yep.
And you write them once every 30 days. Just because these laws are not going now, you could keep this up for every newspaper, I think, has got 30 days and you can write again. Well, I encourage everybody to write.
And when you write your legislator, from a legislator's perspective, because people always said, what do you read and what do you not read? 3 or 4 sentences from the heart are 100 times more effective than a 3-page written thing that may have all the facts, or even less. I know that sometimes groups say, here's your email, put your name on it, and send it out. Understand that as a legislator this time of year, I was getting about 100 emails a day, and you just can't pour, you know, so if it's just some advertising, you get rid of that. But if I see form letters, I read the first one, but then it's difficult. It's very hard to read the exact same email 30 times. You just don't do it. You don't have the time. And so, but if you write from the heart and just say, I want you to vote no on this bill because, and you don't have to be a great writer, you need to be a sincere person. That's what affects people, and they go, wow, there's real people that are talking to me. I've gotten letters from people in prison before. And I'll tell you, the first time you get a letter from prison, I'm like, okay, why do they want to say they didn't do it? Why do they want me to do something so that they can get out? Like, there's some prejudices that are there. But you see these emotion-written, handwritten letters, and it can't help but move a person, because we're human beings. Believe it or not, legislators are human beings too.
I'm sure all of them are.
Well, sometimes I question, but no, this is a time where we really need to appeal to their personal convictions.
Yeah.
They're people of faith, no doubt, but just a sense of what's humane. We're dealing with laws that are completely lacking humanity in its truest sense, and it's just really hard. Yes?
Would you get a phone call? I mean, if you get phone calls, do you get to listen to those, or are they
Yeah,
screened?
so when you get a lot of phone calls, not just because I'm here, I'm a little bit of a different beast from the rest. Because if I got a phone call, I'd answer it. They'd be like, wow, you actually called me back. And I'm like, well, you told me to call you. I just never thought that they'd call you back, like someone called me back. So I'm a little bit different, but a lot of legislators, well, they'll all go through their legislative assistants. And what we were told consistently in the House last week, that legislators that were going to vote yes for this were not responding to those phone calls. So, but still leave the message with their person. Yes?
So you mentioned that form letters, just because there's so many of them. So I filled out, or I sent the form letter that came yesterday, but I added my own paragraph
That's
before-
good.
at the beginning. So
At the
it doesn't
beginning.
look like a form letter at the get-go to you guys?
Yeah,
or
and
it
even
does?
if you, even if you get a form letter, still change it a little bit to your own words. Now, by the way, if you're very uncomfortable writing, then send a form letter. I want you to do something. I'm just telling you what tends to be read a little bit closer. Because also understand that your average legislator, this is the most important thing and paramount thing in the state of Minnesota. And certainly in my work, it's definitely the most important. But understand that that same senator that I'm talking about today probably has 12 to 14 meetings and a couple committee hearings, plus caucus, plus whatever. And they're just really loaded with a lot of things. So that's why I say if they have a lot of emails, they just frankly don't have the time. It's probably not enough time this week, but in general, writing a handwritten letter, a one-page handwritten letter will get read, because no one mails anymore. No one mails a letter, right?
So we had invited, we got lots of questions. Let me just spit this out real quick.
Yeah.
We had invited the Child Protection League up here also. Many of you may know of their work. They do a lot of advocacy for our children that are being sex trafficked and other things along those lines. And one of their concerns also with this bill is that a pimper, a trafficker, can take a child into a facility and have an abduction without the parent knowing about it. So Child Protection League was not able to make it with us here today. I don't know, Candy, if you want to stand up and just talk a little bit about them, if you know much about it.
Well, I don't really know much about that, but I've been involved with Child Protection League for quite some time. I do want to say, I'm a Native American too, and I'm from the White Earth tribe. And also the second oldest of 11, and so I'm thankful to my parents. Times weren't always good with 11 kids, So anyway, but child protection, if you get hooked up to their emails and things, you can see what's going on with a number of different issues related to children, what's going on in our schools, what's going on with the trafficking, even, the abortion issue, because they are really want to protect our children, and they are being under attack at this time. And so their website is cplaction.com, and you can get, just hook on to, ask to be on their newsletter and stay informed. And whenever they have action steps for you too, just like PLAM.
And you can go to plamaction.org to get all this from me. Plam Action, PLAM as in mother, action.org. Go ahead.
Yep, and so, just so you can stay involved. We can't quit. We just can't quit with this. We are being bombarded, and they're trying to push it through. And one question I have for you, Representative.
I'm listening. I'm literally sending someone an email right now.
Okay, you're not.
I am listening.
We're up from, the cities, and does it help for us to
Yes.
contact.
And folks, I can't tell you that this is, the life issue for some of us has been a 50-year battle, right? Okay? I don't know how to impress at what's going on right now. Time's almost out.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're like, oh, should I contact someone else in another district? Yes, because we need all the voices. If they don't answer you, so be it, you tried.
Yeah.
This is all hands on deck right now.
So we have a question over here.
Yes, so I'd like to ask our former legislator here whether you ever changed your vote on something because of a letter that you received.
Yes.
What would be an instance of that?
Well, it's going to be on a less exciting one. But so, okay, you get the 1, maybe 2-minute version of this because it needs a little bit of understanding. But we had Bill for a couple of years for Sunday liquor sales.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a libertarian event, you're like, why should we tell, remember, land of 10,000 regulations, why should we tell people they can't sell liquor on Sundays? And so, but the people in my district, mostly because of the municipals, but another reason I'll give in a second, say they don't want to open it on Sundays. And so I actually told the lobbyists for Sunday sales that I would vote yes. I had a pastor from my district that happened to be there, and he goes, Representative Miller, that vote for Sunday sales is coming up tomorrow, right? And I said, yes, and he goes, please tell me you're not going to vote yes when people are buying liquor when they should be in church. And I was like, nope, I'm voting no. So that's kind of, it's serious, but it's sort of funny. But certainly, what a better answer to your question is in the subtleties. A lot of these bills are stark and obvious, but I will tell you what everyone in this room needs to know is that anyone of character at the Capitol, and we do actually have some people of character actually on both sides of the aisle. I might disagree with their politics, but there are some people of character over there. You speak from your heart, that affects people. Okay? So can we flip these votes in the senators? We had 4 Democrat House members that we had identified that were showing real heartache on voting on this bill, real heartache, and they all voted yes for it.
Yeah.
So some you're going to have to face. So we believe that your senator here locally and some other senators, we believe we have a chance because they live in pro-life areas. So we're hoping that they listen to their people. But in the end, they may not.
And you had a question?
Yeah, a simple one. I'll contact my Senate district representative and House representatives, but what about House Child who's 3, Senate District 3? I'm not in this district. Will he receive my communication?
Yeah, he should. I mean,
Is it did you say you're not in the district out, but you're right?
Yeah,
I'm Senate
he's in
District 8.
Duluth, so he's in 8.
Yeah, so what I recommend is being forthright and honest. So, because that's what we respect more. So if they say, are you a constituent of mine, say no, but you represent me, I'm in the state of Minnesota. So don't lie.
There you go.
To that point, I have people that start with, I'm your constituent, I live in your hometown. Well, I live in a town of 500 people. So if I don't recognize the name, I probably, and it isn't a Dutch name, then it's not me. I'm not Dutch and everyone else is. So, if I hear, even Johnson, I'm like, you don't live in Princeburg, okay? But I'll say, oh, you live in my town, which town is that? And they'll say Princeton. And I go, it's not my town, and that's not even in my district. Sure it is. Well, now they lied to me, so now I'm not going to listen to them at all. So be forthright and say, this is where I live, but this is important to me. And you need to hear me out too. Who is your state senator? Do you know?
McEwen.
John.
Yeah, we're in the law school.
This isn't really news conference stuff. I want to give you a very real answer. I mean, you can keep this, but I'm saying I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. So because I think the media is mostly done here, so now we're talking to people that support what we're doing. The House Human Services Committee heard this bill, and I had a young woman by the name of Angela who wanted to testify. She's 30 years old and she has 5 kids, okay, all under the age of 7. And she said, I'd love to come, but I have to find childcare first. And I said, bring them along. They'll be good in the committee room. And so all 5 kids, so I was playing grandpa daycare up in the corner while she thought this way. But she had her youngest baby, Veronica, on her lap. And someone took a picture of her testifying, but when they took that picture, this 9-month-old baby sitting right next to the author of this bill, Katiza Watun, was giving her baby eyes, was smiling at her. And I think that was actually a God moment. So you have this 9-month-old smiling at the author of this bill. But it also made me realize, reminded me, because I do believe this, but it was a reminder, that Representative Katiza-Wattoon needs our thoughts and prayers too. Right? And so McCune, and I will tell you, she's hard. I've testified in front of her committee, and she is stone cold on this stuff.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we don't try to reach out to her and say, hey, we think you're doing something wrong here.
You know, I'm sure.
Hold on 1 second. Next one, hold on, go right there.
You know, I'm generally speaking making a generalization, but people in this room are people of strong faith generally, okay? I don't know everybody here, but that's kind of comes in. Unfortunately, we live in a world that doesn't see faith as a reason for things.
Correct.
So does it hurt us, even though we know we're doing things for our Creator, for God, does it hurt us if we invoke the faith versus the science, or do you know what I'm saying? In the current state of whatever, do they shut our voice down because we happen to mention that the reason why what's at the heart of this is that
Yeah, some will shut you down.
Yeah.
You certainly need to talk science.
Okay.
But I'm a man of faith, and I don't mean to put I know your question, so I don't want to twist it and put you on the spot. But I'm just saying, I've spoken scripture on the House floor, because the truth is the truth. And we should not be shying away from
That's
that.
right.
So we
The Bible
speak,
says
and one of the things I said in in her committee, I said that they give you 2 minutes to talk, and for some reason I still have 30 seconds, which is a miracle for someone who talks as much as I do. But I took it as a moment, and I said, I want every senator to understand that God's power is not dependent on your belief that he exists. And you will be held accountable before him. They need to hear it. Now, they might reject it, but they need to hear it.
I just don't want them to reject, like, we got 150 calls going this way, 70 or 149 of them were people.
Oh, and they'll give reasons why they want to reject it, and it could be it's those crazy Christians that don't have their life based in reality and science. So I gotta speak it. I think that's the failing of our nation as a whole, so.
And I would encourage you to go to Capitol Report, and I don't have the website, but you can find it on the Minnesota House or Minnesota Senate. Go to the Capitol Report and watch the interview with Jen McCune where she talks about this Senate File 1. And she talks about having somebody else's philosophy shape our laws, and we don't need other people's philosophy. And I'm paraphrasing right now, but she did use her hands a lot, so I think I got that part down. But, you know, and I thought, well, you're legislating your philosophy on that, so do you get it or not? So I would say, you know, as long as you're speaking from the heart and just, you know, go into it with, you know, that perspective. But we all bring our worldview with us, whatever it's going to be. She brings her worldview, you bring your worldview, I bring my worldview. So you can't get away from that. What the laws, I think, are, you know, we're trying to focus on is what's going to happen to our children? What's going to happen to our mothers? Where is the safety and the guardrails in all of this? And that's what we're not seeing, and that's all we're asking for. Let's take a pause, pump the brakes, as they like to say. Let's take a pause, think this really through, and figure out, you know, is this going to work? How does it mesh with other laws? And what is the right thing to do? That's what we want.
Just to be clear, I'm a little bit different. And again, I'm not even putting the state party on the spot here. I just want to be absolutely clear that life is a gift from God from conception to natural born death.
Amen.
And that's what I'm fighting for. So that will not, I'm not, her role is different than mine here, so I'm not trying to put the party on the spot. I just want to be clear that you hear that as well.
I believe that there's some Democrats that have voted yes to this that have a problem with it.
Correct. We know that.
There's so much control with the parties over these people. So the only thing we can do is make it more uncomfortable dealing with us than their party.
Well, sometimes yes.
And I'm sorry that has to be that way.
Sometimes
You know,
yes.
somebody told me a long time ago, it was my brother that just passed away.
I told you I went to the principal's
And he
office.
spent a lot of time down in St. Paul at the Capitol, a lot of time. And he told me, he said, until the politicians are more scared of us than their party, nothing will ever change.
Right on.
And he was down there a lot.
That's an accurate statement.
Well,
So-
and one thing I do want to point out too is that, you know, when I was crafting the words I was going to say today, I did rely on Democrats quite a bit. And then last night I changed it to DFL, because that's what they're called here in Minnesota. And we sometimes forget that, especially here in Duluth. We have a lot of DFL people who are labor people, who are union people, who don't know that their party has taken this left bend and gone off the rails. And so we need to really focus on it. And the fact that Jen McEwen is a Democrat socialist, call her a Democrat socialist, that's what she campaigned under. She's a Democrat socialist with the DFL endorsement. So make sure your DFL friends know that.
Yeah, and also understand on that, when I was driving up, I was talking to my good friend, former Representative Julie Sandstead, who represented Hibbing. She lost this last election. She is a pro-life fighter. You should, when you talk about rising up above your party, she would get lit up by the governor himself sometimes on the things that she stood for. She did not win this last election because that's where the range is going. But this came together. Everything's happening so fast that we had to wrap this. But she said, had I known, I would have come and testified to this stuff as well. As a DFLer, she would have been here right alongside us talking about this stuff, which is a reminder that there are, in the legislature right now, there's very, very few. But here up on the range, because of my friend Julie, I know that there's the average rank and file Democrats up here do not support this at all.
So with that said, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, the young lady who has an incredible brother, rose her hand. That's my sister, Sue.
Okay, I personally am Democrat, okay, but I am very strong pro-life. I don't say, well, because I'm Democrat, I have to be, pro-choice, and that's not true. That's why we're supposed to be in a free country. And I would never support someone that's going towards killing babies. So as far as that I have to be Republican or whatever, I have a lot of Democrat people I know that do not support abortion.
Thank
That's
you.
well said, yes, I agree with that. And I think, where do they go? We saw that up on the range with Senator Bach. He said his party left him. That's why he became an independent, because he could no longer go along with the extreme levels that the DFL has gone.
So we'll take the next question, but I want to, in one moment, ma'am, but what I do want to say is this is getting a little bit longer. If you need to leave, you need to leave.
Yeah.
The
bathroom.
Okay. We get the, but in any case, 20 more minutes? Okay, is that good with people? Okay, so anyway, yes ma'am.
A local parish priest talked about this issue this past Sunday. And in his remarks, he said that KSTP had done a poll, and their poll showed that 30% of Minnesotans were in favor of this. So far from a majority of people.
Yeah, and I will tell you that, thank you, and I will tell you that if the question is asked this way, and I don't know what their question was, but if you ask the question this way, do you believe that there should be no restrictions and no regulations on abortion or abortion care or whatever you want to call it? If it's asked that way, nationwide, it's about 9% of people support that. Another issue we have here in Minnesota is the divide of the metro versus rural. A couple states have this problem. Geographically, about 90% of Minnesota geographically is flat out pro-life. Population-wise, that's not necessarily real true. So if you were to say, do you support, there's lots of ways to slice this, so I'm not saying this is the way to slice it, but if you were to ask the question, exceptions of rape, incest, life and mother, certainly if you throw in health of mother, which is sort of a rat hole to go down, but if you put it that way, life and health of mother, rape and incest, it's about 50-50 in Minnesota. Actually leans a little bit pro-life, a little bit, by about 1%. So what they're dealing in the legislature right now is just so off the path of any sort of reality, but it's going to likely become our reality unless we can stop it in the next couple of days. Because the governor's already said he'll sign it.